Okay, so this is section 6.4, and what's kind of tricky about this section is that in section 6.2 you learned how to factor, and you're going to need to use that skill. But in this section, they give you numbers that I feel are a little bit tougher than the numbers that you had to work with when you originally learned how to factor. So, look at what they have here. They're asking you to start off by setting this equal to 0. And that's the first step in terms of solving these types of equations. You've got to set it equal to 0 to solve. And you're trying to factor whatever you've got on one side once it's set equal to 0, and you're going to use those factors in order to solve. But look at those numbers. You've got 21x squared plus 59x plus 43 equals 3. And if I subtract 3 from both sides in order to get this to be a 0, I'm going to have a 40 in this position. Those are some pretty big numbers. But we can still work with them. I'll tell you how you can get through this type of problem, and it won't be that bad. So what we're going to do is go into the tutor mode, and we can see how they start the problem. They say, okay, you got 21x squared plus 59x plus 40 equals 0. They're suggesting using the AC method, which was to take the first and last number, multiply them together, and then you're going to proceed to find a combination that adds up to 59 but multiplies to give you that 840. Those are some big numbers there. We'll put it that way. So what I do usually with the calculator by my side, if I'm looking for the combo, with numbers like this, I think there's no shame in using your calculator. You take numbers like, you could start with 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and so on, and divide them into 840 and see what you get for the other value. But you can always kind of start, if you tried 2, for instance, if I divide 2 into 840, I would get 420. Well, 2 and 420 do multiply to give you 840, but they're definitely not going to add up to give you 59, right? So skip ahead a little bit. Try something like 20. What happens when I divide 20 into 840? Well, you could put that in. Let's see. So you could put that in. You could say 840 divided by 20, you'd get 42. So you know that 20 and 42 are factors. You add those up, you get 62. So based on that, I know that I need to climb a little more with my 20 in order to get something that's going to work on the opposite end and add up to something a little smaller. So you could try 21, 22, 23, 24 if you want, and see where you get with things. I believe if you go 24, you're going to end up with 35 if you divide it in, and 24 and 35 add up to 59. So based on their method, you could come up with 24 times 35 would add up to 59, or 24 times 35 would be 840, 24 plus 35 would be 59. If you're doing this by trial and error method, you want to try to find combinations that multiply to give you 21, you're going to find combinations that multiply to give you the 40, and then you're going to try to guess and check, trial and error, to get your 59x. Both methods are equally valid. Okay, so 24 and 35, that works. That's really the tough part. From here, you can just kind of look at what you got and follow the steps. I'm going to split 59x into 24x and 35x. And then looking at each group of 2, I would say the greatest common factor between 21x squared and 24x is going to be 3x. And they ask you what's left inside, which is a good step for you to figure out yourself before they were doing it for you. If I divide that out of each of those, I'm going to be left with 7x on the inside and a plus 8. For the second pair, we should end up with the same binomial on the right if we factor this out properly. So if we pull out greatest common factor, looks like 5. We divide each of those by 5 over here. That would give you a 7x and a plus 8. So it does match. We're looking good so far. Okay, and if we get a 7x plus 8 and a 7x plus 8 matching, we know that 7x plus 8 is the binomial common factor, and the pieces left over after you remove those, you divide those away, are 3x and a plus 5. Okay, so these are your factors. Okay, so that's the final step to part 1. We found our factors. Now that's an old step with some tougher numbers. This is a new step. They say, okay, now that you know the factors, you're going to solve. And what you're going to use is the zero factor property, which means that if I took each one of these factors and I set them equal to 0, I'm going to get the solutions that would work to satisfy this whole equation, because if this factor were 0 and I multiplied it with whatever, I'm going to get 0 as an answer. True statement. If I plugged in something and it made this factor 0, I'm going to get something times 0, still 0, true statement. So we look, when we go into tutor mode, we look for the solutions by setting each factor equal to 0, and they're suggesting here, okay, take 3x plus 5, set it equal to 0, take 7x plus 8, set it equal to 0. These are each of your individual factors. And then in the process of solving, you're going to do a little bit of an algebra step, like a basic linear equation. I subtracted 5 from both sides, divided both sides by 3, you're going to end up with a solution that's a fraction of negative 5/3. Okay? In the second case, I'm going to subtract 8 from both sides, divide both sides by 7, negative 8 over 7 is what you're going to get. I'm talking through this. You should do this out on paper. You should show your steps. You're doing little algebra problems, like back in, section 2.3, section 2.4. It was a long time ago, but those types of skills are kind of like basic algebra solving that you need to carry with you to this point. So you might want to go back and refresh that if it's rusty. But these would be your solutions. Okay, so we'll go on to the next